The Death of a Christian Economist, Part 2. Last weekend, as per usual, Otto spent most of the time in his office, uselessly rerunning regression equations on his computer. His pastor's sermon focused on the evils of homosexuality, specifically same-sex marriage. Homosexuality had long been a prime fixation of this particular church. Earlier in the decade, the church had proudly been at the forefront of successful efforts to pass a constitutional amendment that forbade any jurisdiction within the state from adopting or enforcing any law or policy that would extend protections to anyone on the basis of homosexual, lesbian, or bisexual orientation, conduct, practices, or relationships. Now, for the second time, the governor had the gall to veto a bill that would have outlawed same-sex marriage in the state. The governor even possessed the impudence to characterize the bill as fundamentally flawed and divisive. In his sermon, the pastor directed considerable venom at proponents of homosexual marriage in general, and at the governor specifically. A certain state senator was even suspected of being a practicing sodomite. Bilingual education and the teaching of evolution in public schools also received a few cathartic snarls. After church, Otto and other members of his congregation attended a rally in support of Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, who had been arrested and charged with first-degree murder after killing Matthew Shepard. Matthew Shepard was a gay American student at the University of Wyoming. At a nightclub in Laramie, Mr. McKinney and Mr. Henderson lured Matthew into their truck. They then pistol-whipped him, tortured him, and left him to die after tying him to a barbed wire fence outside of town. The murder garnered much national media attention. At the rally, Otto joined others in chants of "God hates fags," "No tears for queers," and "Fag-mat in hell." Otto chanted louder and gesticulated more wildly than anyone else present. Otto was confident that the deity would favorably regard his participation in this activity, and that he would consequently have another valuable point to raise at his second judgment. He happened to catch sight of Patsy on the opposite side of the street, where people who were supportive of Matthew Shepard and gay rights in general had assembled. At that moment, Otto was convinced that his suspicions concerning Patsy were fully confirmed. People on Patsy's side were relatively quiet and were confused by the strident raucousness of the self-proclaimed Christians across the street. Fully reassured of his status as a first-class Bible-believing Christian, Otto returned to the office shortly after eating the modest Sunday meal that Lynette had made for him. It is now Monday, mid-morning. Patsy saunters to her cubicle while holding onto the harness of her service dog. She smiles courteously and says "Good morning" to a couple of the other cubicle dwellers as she passes by. Patsy fires up her computer and starts checking her electronic mail. Otto gets up, approaches Patsy, and summons Patsy to his office. "Leave the dog here," he barks. She gets up and follows him to his office. "Patsy, I got some complaints about your dog. The smell bothers people." "The smell? I bathe her regularly." Patsy shrinks uncomfortably in her chair, her hands crossed, her face blushing. "Who complained about the smell?" Otto sits up in his chair, visibly outraged at Patsy's impertinence. He leans forward, pushes down on the arms of the chair, and glares down towards Patsy, as an alpha baboon would assert his dominance over a lower member of the troop. "We can't have that dog coming in this office and annoying people," he nearly shouts in a voice that is clearly audible throughout the center. The loud voice is unnecessary, as Patsy cannot hear him. She can read his lips, sense the dominance act, and feel the overtones of sexual intimidation and harassment. Patsy sinks in her chair and blushes. Her hands shake. Her palms sweat. Her vagina tingles and moistens protectively. Among our primordial ancestors, the female would, at this point, have felt compelled to present her rump for the male's mounting, thus affirming the hierarchical social bonds and relieving each party's tension. While the instinctive reflexes remain, social conventions have evolved to constrain sexual impulses. Actual physical violence is similarly frowned upon. A modern human, seeking self-actualization at the expense of a lower status human, is generally limited to giving a good browbeating by raising his voice and deploying gestures calculated to intimidate. Raven is a service dog and I have a disability, Patsy meekly offers to explain. "What are you going to do when that dog is in heat?" Had Otto been 10 years younger, his penis would have become erect. When lovers are young, they often quarrel for the pleasure they get from making up. Otto's wife knows just how to handle him, so that there is no longer any quarreling and nothing resembling make-up sex at home. Being a dominant animal at the office affords him ample opportunity to satisfy his needs to express aggression. He's impotent, and a drop of sperm leaks from his penis to add a sweet, salty layer of complexity to his already acrid stink. Patsy is almost crying. Her ears are red. Her nose runs. Mean people had bullied her before. She had applied for the internship under the misapprehension that people in a formal office setting would comport themselves in a professional and dignified manner. Boy, was she wrong. The need for a paycheck has forced humans to cohabit in artificially tight proximity, like pigs in an overcrowded pen. The nastiness of people like Otto only intensifies in such a setting, from which escape is virtually impossible if one cannot forgo the paycheck. Otto suddenly changes the subject. "By the way, someone told me that Matthew Shepard was a friend of yours." Patsy timidly answers, "Yes." "He is burning in hell now. Anyone who says it's okay to be gay has Matthew Shepard's blood on his hands and ought to be ashamed. It's too late to rescue him from his disgusting life of sin." Otto continues on this theme for somewhere between another 15 minutes to 45 minutes. No one knows exactly how long. When he starts babbling, there is no stopping him nor interrupting him. He repeats the same points several times, the invective becoming increasingly vitriolic with each repetition. When one is subjected to one of Otto's jabbering homilies, one generally finds the ambiance to be less pleasant than undergoing a root canal. At least the unpleasantness of a root canal is not typically compounded by a fragrance as foul as Otto's body odor. After a pause of a couple seconds, Otto abruptly changes the subject once again. "I finished the analysis on digital turbinitis in dairy cows last night. I boilerplated the models from the other 4 dairy papers that I got published. This time, the model has the square root of the percent of cows treated with growth hormone instead of the natural logarithm. The paper reads about the same as the others. I changed some of the words and some of the sentences in the materials and methods section. I need you to format the paper according to the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Society's specifications. This journal uses footnotes for the references. Can you get this done by the end of the day? Patsy returns silently and dejectedly to her stall and starts doing the work that Otto had told her to do, but without being able to concentrate. The grammar of Otto's writing is atrocious. Spelling errors all over. His writing is shit. His statistical analysis is shit. Otto is supposed to be an economist, but there is no economics. As he tells it, he was denied tenure at a state university in the South because he is a follower of Christ. A government job is the standard fallback plan for anyone who has a doctoral degree in economics and who fails to gain tenure. There are no other options. People in the academic and government professions have been conditioned to want to expand their portfolio of peer-reviewed publications to the greatest extent possible. It is how they gain status. Otto's work is pure garbage, but is exactly what the scientific journals want. The government will pay the journals exorbitant page charges for him. All that anyone will read of it will be the abstract, if anyone even reads that much. Some who skim his abstract will add Otto's paper to their lists of references when they write their own papers. Many will do so purely out of courtesy, hoping that Otto will reciprocate by citing their work when Otto writes his next paper. Seeking to maximize the citation counts of one's publication is an important element of the scam. When a paper has been cited enough times, it is labeled a highly influential citation and regarded as having a high overall scientific impact, thus augmenting the author's prestige. Formatting a paper for the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Society is more labor-intensive than for other scientific journals. The references are in the form of footnotes, and if you revise something, then you have to reorder your footnotes. The time passes very slowly as Patsy laboriously finds and corrects footnotes that are out of order. She has a slight headache. At 5 p.m., before leaving for the day, Patsy goes to Otto's office. I finished formatting your paper for you. Oh, look at this! Instead of the square of the percent of cows treated with growth hormones, if I change that to the cube of the percent of cows treated with growth hormone, then the R-squared value goes from 0.49 to 0.53. This is a really big finding. Can you work tonight? No, I have to go. I'm only paid until 5 o'clock. Otto considers people who will not work after hours without pay to be mere low-level bureaucrats. He esteems himself and others who work extra hours to be heroic entrepreneurs. Patsy leaves with her dog. Otto stays late, trying some more tweaks to his statistical model. The next morning, Otto still has not finished modifying his regression equation, adding an exponent here, taking a logarithm there, for no real purpose. When it is almost noon, Otto lifts himself out of his chair, but with enormous difficulty. He leaves his office to trudge down the path between cubicle walls towards Patsy's stall. He feels dizzy and starts to fall. He steadies himself by holding onto the top of a cubicle wall with his right arm. His left arm drifts downward. His vision is blurred. He tries to tell Patsy, whose workstation is a few paces away, that he is finally satisfied with his analysis. Not being able to see him and read his lips, she would not be able to understand what he was trying to say. His words are slurred and unintelligible. The left side of his face is drooping. Otto falls unconscious to the floor. Employees nearby gasp and get up to take in the sight. Two of them walk quickly to the Grand Poobah's office to report the fallen colleague. The Grand Poobah, in the middle of a very important phone call, is annoyed. She ends the very important phone call early, explaining the existence of a medical emergency to the very important person at the other end of the line. She then summons an ambulance. Unconscious and scarcely breathing, Otto urinates and defecates in his pants. About 40 minutes later, a team of paramedics enters the office, lifts Otto's large, heavy body onto a gurney, and wheels him away. For 3 days, Otto lies comatose in a hospital bed. Nobody from the Center for Livestock Health Monitoring bothers to visit him, nor cares much. Not even his office allies and presumed friends. No more than any dairy cows would venture to call upon a member of the herd that had been culled for slaughter. His preacher, saddened at the prospect of losing Otto's tithes, goes to see him in the hospital and offers a few minutes' worth of prayer and condolence to his saddened wife. He doesn't linger. On the third day, Otto dies. To no one's surprise, he does not ascend into heaven.